I'd like to say good evening or good morning or good afternoon, depending on which time zone you're calling in from. I know that there are a lot of important things that are taking place in the world, and we appreciate and value your time and the opportunity to share the information that we have for you today. Personally speaking, I think the line has become blurred. I'm not sure whether I'm working from home or sleeping at work anymore, and I suspect that many of you feel the same way. We have a short presentation, and then I think we'll have plenty of time to address questions. The amount of questions we're able to get to is, I guess, depends on how many individuals actually join the meeting. We had a high response rate, so it may be difficult to get to every question. I would encourage you as we go to type your questions into the chat window, and we'll be able to take them. If nothing else, they'll be part of the record that we can use to improve our frequently asked questions list that is posted online. So whatever we're not able to address today, we'll be able to address going forward. So with that, we'll dive right in. Pretty straightforward agenda. I'll introduce a few folks that are on the call with us today, as opposed to going through all 50 people that are on the call. A brief recap of how we got to where we are today, and share some feedback on the membership vote, some of the statistics on the vote, as well as some of the important feedback and questions that we received as a function of that vote. And then what we see is progress since that vote, as well as what we think the next near-term steps are. And then we'll have be in the position to answer some questions. So myself, I'm Tim Bieri. I'm the current NACE Vice President. Joining us on the phone, Sam Scatero is the SSPC Vice President, and he'll be doing the second half of the presentation. We also have Bob Chalker, the NACE Chief Executive Officer, Bill Worms, the SSPC Executive Director, Terry Greenfield, the current NACE President, and Joe Walker, the SSPC President. I also see that we have a few folks from the task group that is on the phone or on the call as well. So we've got plenty of people that can help answer questions in case you stump the presenters. So just to recap, again, this started almost 2 years ago this month with some exploratory meetings back in 2018, some early discussions, and just exploring the opportunities and desire. In 2019, things got serious. We created a couple of task groups, a task group from each organization to come together and work through how we saw the merging of these two, or the combination of these two organizations coming together. And through 2019, we provided several updates to each of the boards to keep them informed and to make sure that they were willing for us to continue progressing the discussions. During the first half of 2020, each organization board held a vote to bring this question to the membership. As member-driven organizations, we felt it was important to have the voice of membership to guide us. If the membership didn't want us to head down this direction, that would be a good thing to know before we went too far. Both boards voted unanimously to bring this to the membership, and the member voting took place in April, early April, and I'll cover those results in the next slide. So what do we see at a high level for the second half of 2020? We've agreed we're going to do it. Now we've got to do it. So there's a tremendous amount of integration that needs to happen. We have We don't have a name or a brand for what this new organization is going to look like. That's one of the key pieces that will be occurring. And we also have to have the legal framework, the legal documentations to create a new organization and then transfer the assets from the existing organizations into those new organizations. So lots of activity over the next second half of the year. And this is all in support of trying to get to what we call is the birthday for new org in early January of 2021. So we have to have a lot of things in place in order to be able to stand up the new organization at that time. Now the line stops at 2021, but we all recognize that the work doesn't stop at 2021. There will be ongoing work and continuing need to integrate the two organizations well beyond that birthday, but we'll be able to extend that line and be able to look at what that future is as we get closer to it. So even though the line stops on the chart, nobody's under the illusion that when we have that birthday that the work stops. Moving to the membership vote, these two tables show the results. The left table shows the results from the NACE membership. The right-hand table shows the results from the SSPC membership, and just the rough statistics that are there. And I think it's important to look at this. The headline numbers here are 10,000 votes were cast, a little more than 10,000 votes were cast. And for any of you that have had any experience with online balloting, when you can get more than 20%, close to 25% of your registered voters to participate in a ballot, that is a really good turnout. And in addition to that, almost 9 out of 10 were in favor of bringing the organizations together. So it was a great turnout. A lot of people expressed their vote through their vote, their wishes through their vote, and the vast majority of them agreed that it would be a good thing to bring the organizations together. As part of that voting process, individuals had the opportunity to share feedback. There was a comment box for both NACE and SSPC members to input questions or comments. We had over 1,400 comments that were submitted between the two organizations. And that takes some time to read through, but we have reviewed them and distilled them down into a couple of categories and then some themes within those categories. So roughly 60% of those 1,400 comments were comments that were in favor of or supporting the bringing together of the two organizations. 26% of those included questions, suggestions, or concerns that individuals wanted to share, and 14% of the comments were from those that were voicing opposition to bringing the organization together. And all of this is valuable feedback, and we need to consider the feedback as we go forward through the design and the creating the structures of the organizations moving forward, because we have an opportunity to maybe address the concerns from those that were opposed, and take on board the feedback and suggestions from those that were in favor. So I'm just going to dive into those three categories a bit deeper. The themes from the feedback where individuals were supportive of bringing the organizations together largely revolved around what we have presented here on the right. So good support for the fact that ideally will be bringing the standards together. Having a unified standards reduces complexity in the marketplace, let's say. As individual members, many of them like the opportunity to only have to pay one membership fee and one certification fee instead of having to duplicate those fees across two organizations. Several individuals recognize that we have two organizations that have not only staff but member volunteers that are working, trying to accomplish very similar goals, very similar deliverables that could be part of global expansion, that could be new markets, that could be a variety of things. And we're duplicating that effort. So we're stretching the resources of both organizations, and coming together really works to minimize the duplication of that effort. Several comments focused on some of the benefits of being able to give inspectors more resources. There's a lot of detail buried beneath this, but functionally bringing together across the value chain of the coatings market gives everybody more resources, and hopefully we have good supportive conversations along the way and can improve how we tackle protective coatings and decorative coatings in the marketplace. And then lastly, there's some benefit around minimizing the ability to interpret different standards. If we get down to a standard, then you only have to worry about different interpretations of one standard as opposed to different interpretations of multiple standards. So the ability to come together in the standards space was another theme of where individuals thought it was important or a good value for bringing the organizations together. In the area of questions, we divided this into kind of these 6 buckets, 6 themes. And I will say that if you've participated or have seen any of the previous webinars or have followed the printed or the electronic information that has been shared on the respective websites, we have FAQ questions that are designed to tackle many of these themes to make sure that we're addressing the concerns and the questions. And we'll continue to use the feedback that we got from the voting and additional feedback that we get along the way to help build out those FAQs. But if we talk about certification, it revolves around what does it mean to me as a certificated, what's the proper adjective here? As a certificate holder, whether it's SSPC or NACE, what does it mean to me if we bring the organizations together? How will I renew? What will I renew under? Things along those lines. And we have some guiding principles of what that looks like, but we recognize in many of these areas, we have to bring member-driven committees together to land what the future path looks like. So we recognize certification is a key consideration, key concern for many of the individuals, many of our members, and we want to protect that value, and we want to ensure that we're not increasing barriers or costs to seek or maintain that. Member value, lots of questions around, will the dues go up, will the benefits go down, or will the benefits go up and the dues go up, or how all that will work. Again, we've put together some guiding principles on what we're trying to drive for member value, and we would like to not erode the value. So there will be a set of benefits for a set of for dues that are equal to where we are today. And there may be more benefits for a slightly higher increased dues tiers. So we're looking at some different levels that will come to play. None of this is landed yet. It's just very much a working model. I'd say in the NACE world, there were several concerns about coatings dominating the organization versus, let's just say, the rest of corrosion, whether that's cathodic protection or the internal corrosion, the academics, the research, all of that. It's important as we design this new organization that we provide a seat at the table for all of the respective stakeholders to ensure that we're getting voices into the conversation. And we've tried to be very thoughtful about how we design the structure to ensure that. Some comments around, or questions, concerns around blue collar versus white collar divide, and whether or not we are capable of speaking the same language. That's one that we'll have to take away and work on. It's not something that we've spent a lot of energy thinking about at this stage. We recognize that there is the potential there, but again, I think it's a real benefit to have membership across the value chain of coatings coming together. And the next one is, how do we appear locally? SSPC has chapters, NACE has sections. We have a lot more sections. NACE has a lot more sections than there are SSPC chapters. How will that work? Again, in our FAQs, we have put together some guiding principles that we'd like to see help steer what a member committee does to address this issue, but we recognize we have to bring together members to help us chart the path forward. And what's the new name? And again, that's a whole branding study that has been kicked off now, but at the time of the vote, had not been kicked off. We didn't go through the effort and the expense of determining a brand and what that strategy would look like, and all of the research that's required to ensure that the logo and the name and the acronym and all the rest of that isn't in use somewhere else in the world, or could be misapplied somewhere else in the world. If we talk about the comments that were from those that were opposed to bringing together the organizations, kind of distilled them into these groups, which is, the concern around creating a monopoly that reduces competition and potentially increases the bureaucracy, that will lose focus as a member-driven, member-focused organization, that this is all about the financial gain for the organizations, or that certain groups might lose their voice or influence. We could tackle these one by one, but this in no means creates a monopoly. It does bring two organizations together that have some degree of overlap, but really, if you look at where the programs are, there's a whole lot more that doesn't overlap. So it does strengthen under one organization. And we have to be mindful that there is a lot of competition globally, both from for-profit organizations and for not-for-profit organizations that work in the same space, work in corrosion, work in standards development, work in training and certification. So coming together actually positions our organization to compete better on the global scale. Member focus, we're both member-driven organizations. We recognize that as a key feature, and we have member-driven teams that are working to put this organization, the new organization, together. So member-focused is hopefully will remain a key theme and a key strength of the new organization. Again, and certain groups may lose their voice or influence. We've, again, tried to be thoughtful about how we've structured the board of directors, how we've structured some advisory committees, and how we're structuring the nominating committee to ensure that at the board level, to start with, that we get the right individuals, the right representation to be at the table. We don't want individual constituencies as a group to lose their voice or influence. We want to ensure we're hearing from our membership. That goes back to being a member-focused organization. I think that's all we had up to this point. And I guess, Sam, I'll hand it over to you for progress and the next steps.
Sure. Thank you, Tim. Great job with the first part of the presentation. I'm happy to take everybody through from the vote, what's happened over the course of the last month, and then looking ahead to where we're going over the upcoming months. So in the past month, since we've received input from the members on the vote, the boards have, both SSPC and NACE, have created a transition team. This transition team was appointed from members from each board to facilitate our combination. So it's basically made up of the people who brought the town halls to you, who did most of the work over the last couple of years. And now what the boards on each side have appointed us to do is to, continue to move things along to a combination. So steps that we've taken over the last month. First step, to retain a facilitator to help us along in the transition. So over the past year, we've been working with a company called McKinley Advisors. They have done a great job to help move the process along, keep us on task, make sure we're checking all the boxes that need to be checked. And they did a great job getting us all the way up to the member vote. But that's where their contract expired at that point. And we had asked them to provide a new contract proposal for us moving forward through and up to merging with the organizations and getting committees together and helping us with all the pieces that we need to do to put take the two organizations and put them together as one. So we're happy to have McKinley on board, and we've been working with them quite extensively, and we're going to be doing so over the course of the next several months. Step 2 for us was to select a CEO for the new organization. That process took place basically by taking a look at the two executives that we've had, both organizations have had. So Bill and Bob have done a fantastic job individually for SSPC and for NACE. And the transition team, came up with a process of how we were going to evaluate the two individuals. We had robust conversations. We discussed everything that we needed to make a decision. And as many of you have probably heard or seen in communications, that Bob Chalker has been named the CEO for the new organization. Now, both Bill and Bob will continue to work individually for the organization. So Bill will stay the CEO of SSPC until the merger, and Bob will stay the CEO of NACE through the merger. And then once the merger has taken place, Bob will move on to take our organization to where it needs to go. Where we are today, right now, is we've identified several working groups, merger working groups, both staff focused and member focused, that we'll be talking about a little more detail in the next slide. We've also initiated one of these groups to start the process of creating a brand for the merged organization. So the The way they're doing that is they're creating requests for proposals. They're working with McKinley Associates to create a request for proposals to go out to organizations that specialize in brand internationally to make sure that we're doing the right things. We're getting a brand that doesn't cause problems with other organizations or other entities that are out there right now, and that's going to do a good job supporting what we're looking to do for this merged organization going forward. This brand that they're going to be working on is a brand for the merged organization. It doesn't mean that SSPC brand and the NACE brand are going to go away. Those brands have been around for 70 plus years, and it's very important that those brands still remain with us moving on into the future. Lastly, we've engaged the legal teams of both NACE and SSPC to start doing the legal stuff that they need to do to make this happen. And again, we're going to cover that a bit in some upcoming slides. So the 5 initial member groups that we're starting out with revolve around the 5 items or 5 areas that you see up on your screen. So chapters and sections, standards, certification, meaning certification for individuals, accreditation, so corporate accreditation, and education. We feel as though these are the 5 sort of heavy lifts for what we need to do to make things happen. And the way these groups are going to come together is the transition team is identifying leaders for each one of these groups. The groups are going to go out. They're going to be working with members throughout the organization, and they're going to be creating charters and basically doing some things to get this moving along. We have a lot of work to do to merge chapters and sections in the right way, standards, certification, accreditation, and education. And one of the most important factors that we're having each one of these member working groups cover is we have a historical way NACE has done things. We have a historical way that SSPC has done things. We're not looking to go forward in just the NACE way or just the SSPC way. We're looking to go forward in the best way. And what that's going to take is it's going to take looking at what NACE does well, looking at what SSPC does well, and also looking outside of our organizations to see what others are doing well and creating a process that works the best for us moving forward. So on the next slide, we have some staff working groups. So, not only is there a big heavy lift to get all of our member teams integrated, so, each one of those aspects are working properly, but we have some great staff on both sides, SSPC and NACE, that have to be integrated. So we're working together and we're using the staff to achieve the missions that we're looking to accomplish. So that'll come through with integrating the staff, creating the corporate structure, working with information technology to develop a process that we're going to use moving forward, because SSPC has their own processes, NACE has theirs. We got to figure out how to put those together and do it in the right way. And then finally, the accounting side, the finance side of the organization, that's one of the key things, because we can't have any blips there. We need to make sure all our reporting is appropriate, that everything is accounted for properly, and that we're doing things that are not going to put the merged organization in any financial hardship. Next slide, please. So looking ahead to where we need to go, we have our staff and member working groups drafting charters. They're going to be defining their own processes, and they're going to figure out how to populate their working groups. Now, they're going to be under the direction of the transition team. So there's going to be oversight there to make sure that the processes that each member working group is using similar, that they're, working together cooperatively to get to an end goal and get there as quickly as possible. We don't expect these groups to be working on this process for 2 or 3 years. We expect them to get there within months. And then, once those processes are created and the people are in their places, we need to get to work. Legally, our lawyers on both sides are putting together documents to be able to combine the associations. So that's what they're working on currently right now. And then as soon as those documents are created and executed, they will begin to create the new entities and do what they need to do to merge the organization. Branding we spoke of before. That's one of the committees that's already kicked off. McKinley and our branding team is working together to pass the RFP process that they're developing out to a short list of firms that have been recommended to us. And they're in the process of getting that RFP together and out to those firms now. So we hope to have a firm selected within the upcoming weeks and get them moving along with the process. As far as moving forward with everything that we're doing, our goal as a task team is to continue to update our membership, both with written, updated FAQs, information as we go along. On the next page, it's going to have some websites where we've been posting information on both sides throughout the process. That will continue to be a resource moving forward. It'll also post live and previously recorded town hall meetings. It'll also post information on upcoming town hall meetings. I think the idea is to continue to have these town halls every time we have reached another milestone. So we felt as though the member vote was a big milestone, and we wanted to make sure everybody was updated and had the opportunity to ask questions. If we can go to the next slide. So these two websites, not only do they provide information, but they also provide email addresses. So if people are interested in getting involved in any way, feel free to send an email in. Let us know what you're interested in. If you're not interested in being on a committee, but you have some thoughts for us, please send the emails in. We're going to be collecting data on both of these sites, and we're looking for, feedback from our members. The whole goal here is to do this right for the members. And the more feedback we have and the more help we have, the better we can make the process. So we encourage, people to get involved when they can. So, feel free to speak up there. We will be paying attention. We will be looking at all this information. It's important for us to be making the right decisions based on the feedback that everyone's giving us. So with that, this town hall presentation piece is wrapped up, but would like to cover any questions people have. As Tim stated earlier in the process, feel free to go onto the chat screen and type in any questions, and we'll be happy to answer those. We had a few questions come in prior to the presentation, which I'll read out loud. And Tim, Terry, Joe, anybody, Bill and Bob, feel free to jump in on any of these. But our first question is from Jerry Holton. He says he has a concern about diluting the NACE brand and certifications. He says, will our CIP and CP certs and standards be accepted by operators after the blending? So Jerry, regarding that question, the blending of the organizations is again going to be on one of these member-led teams. So how these certifications will be blended between cathodic protection, coatings inspector program, protective coatings inspector on the SSPC side, is completely up to those member-led teams. As a transition team, we're going to have some oversight in the process to make sure things are moving forward, well. But I encourage you to, any thoughts, send them in. If you'd like to get involved more so, let us know. But those are going to be the committees that are the experts there. They're going to be the ones that are going to be, answering those questions. And then you went on to say, will we end up having to recertify or possibly resubmit our certifications? I don't think that's in the cards. I think that we're going to try to create a process where people will continue to have their certifications moving forward. At some point, there is going to be a new renewal process. And once that new renewal process is created, you may renew in a different manner. But the idea is that you're going to continue to keep your certifications, and we're not going to have any issues associated with those certifications moving forward.
Hey, Sam, this is Terry. Can I add just to that a little bit as well?
Absolutely.
One of the questions again was would industry, have a problem with accepting? I think one, there's not an intent to dilute anything. I think industry looks to us to make sure that we provide the best and competent professionals to serve, whether it's coating inspection or any aspect of cathodic protection, internal corrosion, whatever it may be. I think Sam laid the groundwork that what we're going to do in the process is make sure that whatever comes out is going to be as good as it can be and not a dilution. So I think we could hopefully put those worries aside, that there's not going to be any attempt. And I think we're going to have the controls in place to make sure it's not an unintended consequence either, that we dilute any of those certification programs. And I think if we work through it correctly, industry should accept better that some of the programs are consolidated and making it easier in how we can present a clearer message to them and how to utilize some of our professionals. So that would be the two elements that I would add to that. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Terry. So our next question came in from Steve Rebus. His first question is, how are we planning to combine certifications, and if they're going to be treated as equal as possible? I think we kind of covered that in Jerry's question. And yes, the idea is that we're going to create a blended program somehow, and that's going to be up to those member-led teams on how they're going to accomplish that. Standards being unified, SP10 and NACE standards being equal. Well, I think some of those standards are already, so if you talk about SP10 on the SSPC side and the NACE standards, some of those are already joint standards. I think that SSPC standards that are just theirs and NACE standards that are just theirs are all going to become standards owned by the larger entity, the merged entity. And I think that those standards, we're going to create a new process on how to create them that's going to be better than the processes that we have now. More streamlined to get them out faster and to get them out in a quality manner where they're really valuable to the industry. His last question, are any SSPC standards that are old and inadequate going to be deleted? I think on both sides of the organizations, we have standards that we don't use anymore. Nothing ever gets deleted. It sort of goes into archives. So if people need to access them, you could always send an email into the organization. Yeah, there's generally a constant process of going through reviewing these standards and making sure that either they're updated, or if we don't use them anymore, that they're sort of put in the archives.
Sam, this is Bob. Can I add to that?
Go ahead.
So one of the things you had mentioned earlier about, we're going to look at what NACE does well, we're going to look at what SSPC does well, but we're also going to look out in the universe of associations to see what are best practices and what's developing out in the world. And this is one of those areas, it's called content management, and it's really putting a robust process in place that keeps your content current. Also allows you to repurpose it, allows you to get it out into the public, into the domain for people to use it. And there's some very interesting developments and practices that you can leverage now with artificial intelligence and of course the Internet of Things, and just some really neat things starting to grow. And Bill and I were talking briefly. We aren't at the point yet where we've been able to share strategy with one another, but there's enough inkling that says this is something that both organizations had already been working on. And I think we've got some things hopefully coming down the pike, and the merger gives us the opportunity to really jump ahead on making sure that we never have standards that are out of date again. So I think this is an area where there's a big benefit by coming together.
Fantastic. All right, our next question is from Anthony Kavaris. He has questions on timing of putting together this direction. He asked, is there going to be a proposed or set timeline of how long the transition will take? You know, Anthony, there's not anything set in stone. It's not like we have a certain date that we have to achieve and come hell or high water, we're going to hit it. Our goal is to do this the right way. Obviously, if we don't set some timelines in place, you know, things might not get done as quickly as we need them to get done. And again, that's why we have a facilitator helping us, you know, helping walk us through the process. You know, the goal right now is to have the legal entities formed by January of next year. That's what we're going to be shooting for, and we're creating a timeline on what it's going to take to achieve that, where we're going to need to go to, you know, to get there, and what it's going to look like for combining everything. But, you know, I think as people know, some of these things are not easy processes, and it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. So we will get there, but, you know, the ultimate goal is to get it done and get it done right, more so than hit a definitive timeline. Second question, are there going to be phases or milestones involved? Yes, without a doubt. As part of our timeline that we're working with McKinley on, there absolutely are going to be milestones. And as we achieve those milestones, that's when we're going to be reaching out to the members and saying, here's where we are. Here's where we're going. This is what we think it's going to take to get there. His last question, what are the phases or groups going to be, and what are these going to include? And I think we covered the member-led groups, the staff-led groups in the presentation here. So with that, that was all the questions that were provided to us prior to this. And I'll turn it over to Tim to maybe take us through some of the questions that are coming up in the chat window.
Sure, thanks, Sam. The Galaxy asked a question. That's pretty. We're global, but not yet Galaxy. Would there be potential conflicts with existing sections in one region, as both will have different short, long-term plans from a, I assume, delivering training training classes and ensuring the health of the local sections? Yes, is the short answer. There are always conflicts within an area, within adjacent areas. You know, what New Orleans is doing affects what Houston does, and what Houston NACE Training Center delivers affects what the Houston section does. And so there is always conflicts. All I can say is that those are things that have to be managed and coordinated, such that we're not sacrificing the health of one area or section over another. So I think, yes, there'll be conflicts, and yes, we'll have to manage them in order to ensure that we can do it in a cohesive fashion.
Tim, this is Bob. Let me add a little to that, and I might be reading more into this question than is there, but I think one of the things also, the intent is we won't have duplicative sections, right? That the new organization will have a set of sections in each area, but you're not going to have a NACE and an SSPC section in the future. It's going to be a new org, whatever the branding of that is section that will serve those areas. So that I think will help reduce some of that conflict. But as you mentioned, there's still order areas that are always a challenge.
Hey, this is Terry. Just to help, there was a follow-on, not to skip anybody's question, but from the from Galaxy 12, there was a follow-on question that may provide some more context to that. And it was, our organization was in the process of putting together future SSPC courses in our country. Would that continue or pause? The local NACE section pushes more inspection courses while we push SSPC 1.
I assume that's SSPC training, but I don't know, Bill, that might be a question.
Yeah, from our perspective, whatever's ongoing now will continue to be ongoing. And then once the new entity comes together, or once the member groups decide how that's going to be worked out, whatever change is required at that time, if any, will happen then. But as of now, we're continuing business as usual for SSPC and NACE.
Good, thanks. From Eric, the member working groups that were listed: certification, accreditation, and education. 3 distinct areas, but the education portion has a great deal of overlap with certification and accreditation groups. Has that been taken into account, and how do we ensure that they're working together and maybe cross-pollinating enough to make sure that we don't end up with 3 different directions from them? It is certainly a valid piece of feedback, and something that we have been discussing at a very high level. But until we bring those groups together and develop their charter for them that defines the boundaries and the expectations, I'd hedge and say we can't answer that question fully. We want to make sure that we're not undoing one particular aspect while redoing a different aspect in different groups.
Right. If I may just add to that a little bit, and I
Sure.
understand, I respect and appreciate that answer, but you can understand, to achieve a certification, you must go through an education program.
Yep.
And yeah, so okay.
We recognize that they're definitely linked, without a doubt, and to develop an education program that doesn't then meet the needs of our certification scheme doesn't seem very productive.
Yeah, one thing maybe, Eric, I can offer is that all these groups will be reporting up to the task group, right? So there will be oversight to make sure that everybody is working on the proper areas and that no one's conflicting and they're all homogenizing. And again, they'll all have charters that they're writing up. So all of that will be part of the review process to make sure it's proceeding in the right manner.
Right, and I did have that listed. I felt it was valuable enough a point to bring up to make sure that.
Eric, I'll add one other piece. When we talked about McKinley Advisors being an integral part of this, there are 4 or 5 areas where we're actually asking them to take the lead in the program management and the facilitation. And all 3 of those fall in that space. And one of the things that they will be doing is matching those checkpoints. And I know some of you don't know McKinley Advisors, but they are world-class when it comes to association management, what associations do. They understand certification, education, accreditation as well as any of us. And they'll be making sure that we're not doing something to get cross-purpose. One of the big things is we got to make sure when we're done, we're 17024, at least aligned with 17024, or preferably compliant. And if we're not, that's been a purposeful decision and not a mistake. So
right, the avoidance of redundancy. I mean, let's use our resources the most wise way we can. I understand there'd be an oversight group to that. No, that's great. I appreciate the clarification from all of you. Thank you.
Good. I guess going down, we've got Gabriel asked, he sent that to me privately, how will we select people to get participation in the different groups, and how will we functionally ensure that we have a global view as part of that participation. And I would just say, Gabriel, we're going to be selecting what is the leadership of these working groups, and positioning individuals, and they're going to have to develop how they want to populate their working group. We want the working groups to stay relatively small and nimble so that we can make good progress, but we need to ensure that we've got the right spectrum of representation that occurs there, or at least enough checkpoints along the way to make sure that they're addressing the various constituencies that we have. So will a individual from a particular region in the globe be on every committee? Probably not, but we want to make sure that we have the global perspective as we go through these processes, because it's a key important factor and was one of the big benefits that we saw in bringing the organizations together. Got time for, looks like a couple of more. Anthony, hopefully a section chapter that Hawaii-based members can reasonably participate in. We had a section, but it was not led well and the participation fell apart. It's unfortunate, Anthony. It's certainly a small, captive, geographically small and captive audience, and difficult, especially if you've got cross-island transport. But I agree, and we're always looking for member leaders to volunteer if you want to take on some leadership roles in what will be the new organization there. Lots of resources and support to be able to help folks do that. Ryan, apologies if we were poking a little bit of fun at Galaxy. It just came across oddly from your phone. So Ryan updated everybody that Galaxy J2 is Ryan. And then from Dan, out of curiosity, how is the Master Painter Institute included in this process, if at all? Bob, I'll let you take that one.
Can you say it again, please? I didn't, which question?
Sure, it's how is the Master Painters Institute included in this process, if at all?
So right now, Master Painters Institute has sort of been outside the process because there's not an equivalent on the SSPC side. By the way, same with the NACE Foundation. Both of those will be having discussions. The Master Painters Institute will be integral to the new organization. That's a given. It's wholly owned by NACE. It will be brought in. We got to figure out exactly how it's going to fit and where it's going to fit. That organizational design work still needs to be done. It will come fully into it. But exactly how and what that looks like is still to be determined.
Okay, thanks. Jose was hopeful that we have membership from international, not just from the North America region. Agree, Jose. We have on our task group, we have international members. Some of us also work for large corporations that have a big international footprint. So we are sensitive to the international needs and the perspective. Not everything is done to North American standards or codes. So we can always debate whether we've got the right balance, but we do have some key representation in that space. And if you look at how we've proposed the new structure of the boards and nominating committee, as well as we have an advisory committee that's focused solely on making sure we've got a global view, global seat at the table. So we want that perspective because we view that as key growth. Let's see. So one more from Ryan. We operate the Corrosion Institute of the Caribbean, or is it Caribbean, and have been working comfortably with SSPC carrying out courses and training locally. There is another body locally that focuses on NACE inspection courses only. I hope that there is no conflict. Yeah, Ryan, it's great to see the passion about the training, and we want to make sure that we're supporting the combined membership, providing that not only the education but the certification as needed. I don't know if anyone else wants to chip in on.
I'll just add that is what they're expressing in the Caribbean is not unique to the Caribbean. There are places around the world where we're going to have to work through exactly what and how we'll deliver education globally. Passion is a great start to making sure it happens. I will say this, there is a need and an absolute desire to train and qualify both the craft worker, the inspector, the engineer, and others. And that's one of the advantages of bringing the two organizations together. So I don't see one type of training becoming primary over the other. I see us offering a menu of training that covers the spectrum of the professions in our field.
Good. Well, I guess opportunity for any final thoughts, Joe Walker, Terry, from a member presidential standpoint. Joe?
I just want to go back to current SSPC and NACE standards. I think it's important for the members to know that we understand that these standards are specified around the globe. And we're not going to go changing current standards that are in specifications willy-nilly and dilute these legacy brands that both organizations have worked so hard to get in standards and specs around the world. That's my only comment. And great job, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, great. This is Terry. Great job. I'll just end a little bit. Just everyone is always going to have concerns. And what I hope is that as we start to move it forward, you know, the international participation has been a strong component of all discussions. I mean, it's recognized that we want that demographic constituency, whatever you want to call it, at the table. What I hope is that everyone sees as we start to move forward that we will hopefully alleviate some of the concerns. Again, one of the call it the mantra, whatever, is to take what we have and do the best we can do with the resources, because there is a great benefit in having the combined resources. Typically teams that would work on for different organizations within the same discipline now can work together. So I'm confident and pretty optimistic that we're going to do a really good job in how we move these forward. Welcome feedback and discussion the whole way through, but I hope, again, just want to leave everyone, the object's not to dilute or make it easy necessarily. The object is to do the best we can do with the programs that we have and really support and provide the industry the best solution in training and standards and every other aspect of the products and services that the new organization will provide. And that could sound like a canned answer, but that's always been, I've really enjoyed working with this team because throughout the process, that's been the driving force, is to look at how to do it the best we can do it.
Good, thanks, Terry. Bill Worms, any final thoughts from your perspective?
Maybe just one thought or one comment. We had our first virtual get-together of the NACE and SSPC staffs today. And I have to say, everybody's very enthusiastic about getting the organization up and going and combining. And everybody, I think, is looking forward to the new opportunities for themselves and for the industry. And I think everybody understands this is a potential legacy event where, you know, this is an opportunity to take 70 and 75 years of organizational stuff and now start with a white sheet of paper and do it right and make the changes that maybe weren't made in the past. So good luck to everybody.
Thanks, Bill. I guess Bob and then Sam, and we'll wrap it up.
Thanks, Tim. I guess, first of all, I want to say I'm very much looking forward to working with everybody, both those who are coming from the SSPC legacy, as well as the people from the NACE side of the house. You know, this is going to be an interesting challenge. And from the beginning, we said, we got to do everything we can to take the best and find the best. And if you're not focused on that, it's easy to miss that opportunity and miscue. And so I think what I ask and challenge is, as you watch and see what's happening, really spend the time to understand why the decisions are being made and why we're doing some of the things we're doing. Because there's going to be a lot of change. I don't care if your history is on the NACE side or it's on the SSPC. I don't care if you're a member or you're a staff person. We are all going to experience a tremendous amount of change. As humans, we don't like change, even though it's good for us. It makes us uncomfortable. But my question and ask is that please look to find why it's being done, understand the why, spend some time getting your questions answered, and then look for the best in what we're doing. So it's a huge opportunity, as Bill said, that many organizations never get the opportunity to do. So I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to get out of my house and get out of social distancing and get on the road to meet a lot of you folks.
Sam?
So I think we had a lot of great comments there from everybody. What I'd like to leave everyone with is, if, you know, we don't have any more questions popping up right now, but if you guys have any questions that come up over the course of the next 11 hours, we have another town hall meeting coming up 11 hours from now. Some cases that's tomorrow for people, some cases maybe not. So feel free to join us again at that presentation and, you know, ask questions, continue to provide us feedback. That's what helps us along through the process. The more that we get, the more that we can understand what the members are looking for. And especially if people belong to other associations and they do things real well in that association, you like their processes, please share that with us. Because, you know, when we go and we look at what SSPC does and what NACE does well, we're still also looking at what is the industry doing well. And maybe we can bring some of those things in, you know, to piggyback on Bill's comment, to use, you know, what we're learning, you know, from both organizations and from the industry to help us start over again on that white sheet of paper. So thank you.
Good, thanks. I just have two closing thoughts. One is to revisit Jerry's the very first question about the concern about industry adopting by operators. I mean, a good portion of the voting population that took place was by operators. I mean, we are the industry as a collective group. And if we design something that is not usable or streamlining or delivering value, then shame on us, right? I mean, it falls to us to be able to do that. And the last piece I would leave is we want to go through this step by step. There's no shortcuts, but we want to do it with intent. We don't want this be a 3-year process to get to bring these organizations together, because we're not delivering on the value if we take that long. So we recognize that piece. I hope everyone is able to stay safe and continue to remain engaged in these town halls and in the process. You certainly have the opportunity to reach out to folks that were on the phone or on the call if there's specific questions that we can help with. So I think with that, we'll bring the session to a close. Thank you.
Good night to some and good morning to some on the other side of the world. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, correct.
Take care, everyone.
All right.